Herbert Street by David Satchel. The action of this story takes place in Hemel, Hempstead, sometime in the future. Chapter 1. Exhumation. Despite the stinging sweat in his eyes and the late afternoon February gloom, Ben Carter could just see the end of his spade as it pierced the damp clay nearly 2 metres down at the bottom of the hole. He was enjoying working his 60-year-old lungs and muscles and encouraged himself with memories of his school holidays, making dugouts large enough for a 9-year-old boy and his friends to climb in and shoot air guns at imagined enemies and catapults at real ones. With a dull thud, his spade hit what he hoped was the lid of a coffin. Moments later, frantic scraping revealed what was indeed the corner of some sort of wooden box. "Found it!" he shouted, and leant back against the side of the hole to get his breath, cursing gently as crumbs of loose soil fell down the back of his neck. 5 men came running across the long grass from a collection of cars and a mechanical digger parked nearby, barely visible in the late afternoon twilight. "Well done, Ben," said one man, climbing down the ladder and obviously in charge of everything. "Bring some more lights, please. It'll be dark soon." "Let's see what we have got down here." "I think it's him, Dr. Salter," panted Ben. "Only this is just a corner. We've been digging in slightly the wrong place. We'll have to widen the hole to uncover the rest of it." Dr. Salter, a man half Ben's age, looked up at the others standing on the rim of the hole, now each with a lantern in his hand. "What do you think? It's 4:30. Shall we come back tomorrow or work a bit longer? It's up to you." They glanced at each other. "We'll all stay," said one of them. "Good. Bring the JCB over and widen the hole about 3 metres that way. We'll need the spotlights on first. You can go if you want, Ben. You've done more than your share of the digging today. You must be exhausted." "I'm probably fitter than you, Dr. Salter, and it's not every day I get to dig up a real live highwayman. I mean a dead one. No, I'll stay. Don't forget I'm a volunteer, so this is my own unpaid fun time." Dr. Salter laughed and knelt down to examine the coffin lid, poking it with a small trowel. "It's in good condition, considering it's 200 years old." Then almost sang the words, "This is getting exciting." He stood up. "That's a JCB starting up. We better get out." "No, after you. I'll hold the ladder." "Do you fancy some tea? I've a flask in the Land Rover." Minutes later they sat in the warm, comfortable cab, peering through the windscreen at the men working the digger, the whole scene lit by the stark glare of the spotlights. "It's like some sort of historical pageant," said Ben. "Well, it is a sort of drama when you think about it, thanks to your discovery. More dramatic than the crime itself, which was pretty sordid, and the execution was miserable and disgusting as always, with half the local population watching. Do you want more tea? Biscuits? Chocolate? You're the hero. Have anything you want." "No, thanks." "Listen, this man Robert Snook, all I know about him is that he was a highwayman who robbed a postboy, and he was hung just here where he did it. Is that right? Probably Hemel Hempstead's only claim to fame apart from the Buncefield oil depot explosion. You can tell me more about him if we have time." "OK, it won't take long because we only know a few actual facts. His real name was James Snook, but Robert probably came from him being called Robber Snook." "How did they catch him?" "I've told this story so many times it will be easier for me if I start at the beginning with the crime itself. This happened one Sunday evening here on Boxmoor in May 1801. He robbed a postboy called John Stevens, who was carrying papers and money from Tring to Hemel Hempstead. The Postmaster General put up a reward of £200 for his arrest. What's that in modern money? More than 20,000 at least. Ironically, he was captured by some other postboys in Marlborough Forest, one of whom spotted him because he knew him from earlier years in Hungerford, where he and Snook grew up. The robbery victim, John Stevens, said he couldn't identify him because it was dark at the time. But the crucial piece of evidence was a huge banknote that Snook tried to spend in London. The usual punishment for highway robbery was deportation, but it was decided to make an example of him, so he was sentenced to hang at the scene of his crime. He was held overnight at the Swan Public House, which you can see over there through the trees. From there he is supposed to have called to the crowd going to the scene of the execution, "No need to hurry, they won't start without me," or something similar. He was buried near the gallows without a coffin, but apparently the next day some local people donated one. His body was dug up and then reburied in it the next day. And why are we digging him up now? Because of a proposed new slip road to the A41 bypass. I don't think it'll ever be built, but they offered me a 6-month window to do some excavation. So here we are. Half an hour later, Dr. Salter climbed down the ladder and found himself looking at the now completely exposed coffin. There were no marks or writing on the lid. "OK, you can come down now and have a go at lifting it out, please, gentlemen." 6 spades were eased down between the sides of the coffin and the wet clay. "After 3. 1, 2, 3. 6 pairs of hands pressed down on the spade handles, and accompanied by grunts from the men and loud squelching from the soggy clay, the coffin was levered up enough for 2 planks to be placed underneath. 4 men climbed out of the grave, leaving Dr. Salter and Ben to attach 4 ropes to the planks. Dr. Salter stood up, shading his eyes against the powerful lights above, his breath clearly visible in the glare. "Thank you, gentlemen. If you're ready, try and pull together and keep it level. I'll tell you if it tilts too much." The 2 men stood back against the side of the hole to watch the coffin's receding silhouette ascending to the circle of eager faces above. They scrambled up the ladder as the precious load reached the top and was laid on the ground. "It doesn't weigh much. Perhaps it's empty," said one of the men, lifting one end with the toe of his boot. "Careful," said Dr. Salter. "It's a bit fragile. If we lift it by the planks, we can carry it into the hut and leave it on the table. It'll be quite secure in there, and we can open it in the morning." By now a small crowd of 20 or so people had arrived. They followed in silence at a respectful distance. It could well have been a scene from a Shakespearean tragedy. Several cars stopped on the nearby main road to watch the drama. From there they could see the little procession of tired but happy men trudging through a knee-high carpet of white mist lit by the searchlights and bobbing lanterns. Their progress was also being watched by a disinterested group of belted Galloway cows with breath steaming from their nostrils. Inside the hut there was very little standing room around the table. Everyone looked at Dr. Salter. "You want me to open it now, don't you?" he smiled, raising his hands like a surgeon. "Very well, then. Hammer, chisel, lever." The lid was soon freed from its crumbling and rusted nails. Heads and shoulders leant forward as far as they could go to the sound of mass intake of breath. There was indeed a skeleton, smaller than everyone expected, but all the bones were more or less in place. The skull had a full set of healthy teeth and grinned a welcome to the doctor and the awestruck workmen. Tangled around the bones of the left hand was a small St. Christopher medallion on a chain. After a short silence, Dr. Salter spoke very seriously and quietly. "There is one thing I can tell you straight away. Even though I'm not a medical doctor, I know a bit about human anatomy, and one thing is pretty certain. There ought to be an inquest or something similar. It's obvious to me by looking at the skeleton that these are not the remains of James Snook. That there is a female pelvic bone. This was a woman, and in her 20s by the look of the teeth. So who was she, and what happened to Mr. Snook?"